Hello, and welcome to episode 5 of I Was Raised in a Religious Cult Stories from the Other Side. My name is Scar, and my partner will be joining me today. Their name is Lost in Japan. They go by Japan. If you want to say hi.
Hi, I'm here. I'm emotional support Japan.
Yeah, pretty much. Anyway, let's get into this. So last episode we were talking about how third grade was for me and all the challenges that year kind of brought me. I've been kind of going in order of my life and in school and the different years. I feel like it makes it a little easier to tell the story. I do want to start off this episode by saying there is going to be talk of sexual abuse slash assault in this episode, as well as talk of suicide. I will be putting timestamps in the description for those moments. If that's something that is a little bit much for you, that's totally okay. I'd rather you take your step away and not do anything that could potentially be harmful to you. I'm so sorry. I'm not talking well right now. I'm very nervous.
You got this. It's all good.
I'm going to be talking about some things in this episode that I've shared with very few people, and it's really hard to talk about. And, I think that's why I've had a little bit of a hard time sitting down to record this episode. It's even going to be late today. It's hard. This is hard stuff to deal with and talk about. And I appreciate anyone that listens for listening. And I feel like it's important to talk about subjects like this because the more we talk about it, the more there will be people that will feel less alone. And I think talking about our struggles in life is really important. So I will be putting timestamps in the description. Obviously, the general trigger warning for this is child abuse, growing up in a cult, religious abuse, that kind of stuff. So usually I start the episode by kind of talking about the summer before the school year started. There's a few things I was just going to talk about. I don't remember a lot from that summer. I do remember, we went to the convention as usual. Jehovah's Witnesses host a 3-day convention every year during the summer. Now, I did enjoy doing this, and it was because we were super poor, and so this was like a vacation for us, the only time we really got out to do anything that wasn't at home. Like, we would go camping and stuff, which, I enjoyed, but we weren't the kind of people that could afford to go anywhere. So we would go to the big city every year and go for the convention. I do know it was really stressful for my parents. They couldn't afford it. It was hard to get time off. It was like a whole thing. And I hated that for them, and it's just Jehovah's Witnesses want to control every aspect of your life, including, the summertime. Now, I did like staying in a hotel. My brother and I would get to swim. My brother and I love swimming. We would go and swim in the pool as long as we could. The thing about these conventions, one thing about them, God, I'm not talking well, I'm sorry.
You're
Okay.
fine. You're doing great. You're doing great.
Anyway, let me get into it. It always, like I said, happened in the middle of summer. And the thing about where I grew up, southern summer heat is that humidity. It was so freaking hot. And my dad, they would call these privileges. I don't know how it's a privilege in this kind of heat, but his privilege was to help direct traffic. So he would spend the morning outside getting really sweaty and gross doing this. Usually we would help clean the bathrooms. And it was like, everyone's like, oh my God, it's a privilege to be able to do this. And I'm like looking back and I'm like, is it though? But the conventions were like a huge deal. You got to see people that you hadn't seen in a while. I did really struggle with it. It was 3 days of sitting for hours in a day. And I had a really hard time focusing the whole time. I've mentioned that I'm neurodivergent, I have autism, ADHD, and this was really difficult for me. I would try to take these notes, and I did the best I could. There wasn't a lot I could do there. Every year they had something called a drama. And what the drama was is they would choose certain kingdom halls to put on a play, basically, based on a Bible passage. I always wanted to do it. I loved acting, but unfortunately we never got chosen to do it. One problem with this convention also was my dad was really hard to put up with. My dad's an alcoholic, and, going to these conventions for all day long, my dad couldn't drink, and he would get so angry. And my dad, the thing about him, he wants to be the life of the party, right? He wants to be charismatic. My dad is good at it. He can be charismatic. People like him. They think he's this great guy. And he ate it up. He loved the attention. He loved getting to be the big man, make people laugh. And then we'd get in the car and that switch would happen. It's like, oh, he's angry. He's mean and he's angry and he's hot and just really hateful. And it was sensory hell for me to go to these conventions. So many people, hours inside of a building, and it was awful. So of course I'm not in a good mood, and if I gave my dad any sort of attitude, we would clash, and he would scream, and I'd usually end up crying, and I would get in trouble for crying. It was always a thing like, oh, you're too sensitive. And it's like, I mean, I'm allowed to have emotions, and I don't think yelling at children is okay,
Not at all.
But I'd get in trouble for that. So that's kind of how I learned to cry quietly. I would just kind of lean my head against the window and just let the tears go and not make any noise. And my dad was an SOB for not, because he wasn't drinking, and we didn't have the money for this. And my dad, I don't think ever really wanted to be a Jehovah's Witness. So my brother and I, we'd get ourselves to the pool when we got back to the hotel room after. Usually we'd have to go to dinner with people, which also sensory hell for me. But when we got back, we would go swimming, and we loved that, and if we were lucky, we would get put in the same hotel as like somebody that I knew or our friends or whatever. But generally we were too poor to be in the hotels that everybody else was in. So I remember one of the conventions we went to, I think I mentioned that, in the congregation we were starting to have problems, and they were doing stuff, and they recommended us a hotel. They said, oh yeah, it's a great hotel. And we got there, and they took us to the basement of the hotel, to this weird room. There was like a drug deal happening in the hallway, and then we get inside the room, and there was like cockroaches, there was like blood on some of the bedding. I'm like
crazy.
Yeah, it was so bad. My parents were like, no. So that was fun. It was a tough...
I just figured that's the kind of crack den you're from, so we figured you'd be at home.
You're poor
even though we're from the same place, even though everybody's poor in Arkansas and nobody's rich, really.
Except, this family.
But even then, I think they're still, like, in retrospect, I think they're Arkansas rich. I don't think they're actually,
they're small
rich,
town rich, right? Like, that's the thing. They're small town rich, and the thing about being small town rich, big fish in a little pond, you're gonna seem like you're the it people. I'm trying not to cuss. I've been trying not to cuss. I cuss a lot regularly, so I'm doing the best I can here. But yeah, you're the it people, and, they had mansions, and I don't know. Felt like they could just had endless amounts of money, but I guess, you don't have to worry as much if your housing is situated and you own your house. That's a big difference.
Yeah.
But we had our convention. I think this was the summer that my mom closed her shop down that we had opened, and she started a new job. She was cleaning a bank in the town that we're going to the Kingdom Hall in. So she was like the nighttime janitor. She'd go in, clean the bank, and at some point she got another bank to clean in a nearby town, and this became like a huge part of my life. I hated it. I really did, because usually it'd be after a long day of school, then we'd have to go to the meeting, and then we'd have to go help her clean 2 nights a week after the meetings, and we were already getting home at like 10 o'clock at night after the meetings anyway, so then cleaning the bank would be like tack on another hour, and that was tough, and I hated it, and I have so many bad memories from the banks. Like, I hate them so much. I even have like bad dreams about being in those banks sometimes. She did have my brother and I, we would help her every Friday, and she would pay us $20 a month for that, so that was nice to have like some kind of money, but honestly, I hated it, and I think it was just like such a bad time in my life. Actually, all the times in my life were bad, if we're being completely honest. I don't think...
Not just as one time, but all the time.
It just was all crappy, my childhood, and it was rough. And I know my mom had like a lot of issues at that job. My mom doesn't get along with anybody, But to be fair, the thing about banks in the South is the workers are very hoity-toity. Like, they think they're like all that or something for working at a bank. I don't know what it is. Like, Japan can attest to this.
Oh yeah.
You've seen the things that we've had to deal with. It's so weird. I don't understand it. What you're a like what? It's not like you're a millionaire or something. I don't know. It's a weird vibe. I think it was probably a little bit of her and a little bit of them. You know, she would run into issues like they're like, "Oh, you're stealing our dog treats." No, like why would we steal your dog treats? Because they had them for the tellers in the back. They're like, "Oh, you're stealing our dog treats." We're like, "No." Or one time they would sometimes stuff rags in the garbage disposal. You know, that was a problem, and then they'd make my mom dig it out. This one person was like, "You're messing with my chair." We're like, "We're not messing with your chair. Yeah, you're adjusting the level of it." Like, why would we do that? You know, but I don't know how much of it was my mom and how much of it was them. I can only see it from my mom's point of view, to be fair.
That
And
is
then
valid.
yeah, that's a lot of the things with my life though, right? Like with my mom is like anytime she tells me about issues with people, unfortunately a lot of times it is my mom. So I a lot of my stories are through the lens of my parents, so I don't entirely know sometimes if it was my mom or if it was them or both of them, you know? So I can see it being both of them. And then one of the people that the congregation we were going to work there, he was the loan officer at this bank. And this kind of was eye-opening for me because one time we noticed often he would always have his kids' birthdays on his desk calendar, which, you know, that's normally not weird, but Jehovah's Witnesses don't celebrate birthdays. And this is kind of how we found out that they celebrated him, because we also saw some pictures he left out one time of a birthday party they had. So this is extremely hypocritical because we've been told do not celebrate birthdays, and like we were like making sure we don't do that. You know, my mom was very by the book with our beliefs to a certain extent. I don't know. In a lot of ways she was, in some ways she wasn't, and it really bothered me. You know, it felt like their kids got everything. They got whatever they wanted. Like, they had money. They got to do whatever they wanted. Like, they got all the toys. They got vacations. They got everything that I wanted and more. And, like, you know, Jehovah, they drilled into our heads, never, higher education isn't the way. You know, you want to serve Jehovah. But all of their kids ended up going to college. One of them became, like, a nurse. They all went to college for something. So I don't think they abided by the same rules that we did.
Doesn't sound like it at all.
Which was just, I don't know, it was tough. Because they're the ones that taught us that we can't do this, you know? And I hated the hypocrisy, and like a huge thing with autism is a strong sense of justice. And I remember his oldest daughter got to go to like the prom, which is like a big no-no with Jehovah's Witnesses as well. I don't think it's like, oh, they tell you not to, but they're like strongly like, hey, you shouldn't go to the prom. So it was really tough, you know, because it felt like we were doing what we were supposed to, but they didn't seem to appreciate that. I don't know, it was tough. I was going to talk about something else, which I don't know why. It doesn't feel like it's super important. My brain's telling me I want to talk about it, I guess.
That's all that matters.
Yeah. So we had our Tuesday night meetings. What they would do is have the Tuesday night meetings generally at like certain people's houses, like just to make it to where in the South, because everything's so spread out, you know, a Tuesday night meeting they would have it at someone's house that's closer to other people so that everybody's families can go to the house. And it also, if I'm not mistaken, it was like what was it? They did like, for if Armageddon were to happen, it's a meeting point for those groups of people, is that house, because they're like, oh, you know, during Armageddon they're not going to allow us to be Jehovah's Witnesses or allow us to meet, so if we can meet at each other's houses. So that's kind of also what it was. And the one we went to was in the basement of one of the elders' houses, which, funny thing about that elder is I think he ended up getting disfellowshipped at one point. He was an alcoholic and kept getting DUIs, and they kept trying to cover it up. It was like a whole thing.
Jeez.
It was, I mean, they even covered it up with the police.
It's better than what I thought you were going to go down.
What do you mean?
I mean, yeah, normally when people get disfellowshipped and it actually sticks, it's a lot worse.
You know, I think you mean sexual abuse, but
Yes.
actually they don't punish people
No,
much for
not
that
always, but
unless they go to
if they
jail.
got caught by that's what I mean. Like if they got caught by the police, it would be
Yeah, now
different.
if they find out about it in the congregation, generally they sweep it under the rug and say that the
No, they
person.
just have parties and
Yeah.
shit.
No. Yeah, they don't actually deal with that. But no, thankfully he is not one of those. We'll get to that at some point. But it was in their basement, and like I have bad dreams about that room too. And I remember, so on one wall they had like this huge mural that like someone's sister-in-law painted. It was like this very paradisiac view. I do remember the mural wasn't very good. And I was very young and I thought that. I don't know why that stands out in my head, but it does. I just remember thinking it just wasn't that good. It also just felt like very
Funny.
plain. I would stare at it a lot though, because like I just had such a hard time paying attention to the meetings, which I think that was my neurodivergence. I struggled at school too. Um, this might be mean, but the best way I feel like I can describe the room is like it feels like what purgatory would feel like. Um, it was like the chairs were super uncomfortable. Like you couldn't comfortably sit. They didn't have like armrest. It was just straight back chairs. They had this like fluorescent lighting. And the basement was kind of smaller. Like it was big, but the room that they had it in was kind of small. And they had this like really huge bougie house. And so like all these other rooms felt more warm and inviting, but the basement felt like a punishment. Which we weren't allowed in the other rooms. There was like this non-spoken rule not to go anywhere else in their house kind of thing. Like, because the thing about it is a lot of the people that went to their house for this meeting were poor. And they were rich. They had like giant chandeliers, when you walk in and it's this huge tile opening room with this big huge chandelier. I remember that. And they had like this very like all this like fancy equipment in their kitchen, like but we weren't really allowed in other rooms. And it was like an unspoken rule, but like we all kind of felt like we didn't belong. We're living different lives. And that was it was like this feeling of not belonging, and going to that dingy basement kind of made it feel like that even more. Like I said, a lot of the people that had to go to their house, we were all pretty poor, so it was kind of a weird thing, I guess. When you're super poor and you go see how other people live, it's not a good feeling. Especially when they have a gross amount of money. And it's such a weird thing to say, but I feel like rich people houses always have like a very specific smell. I don't know. I don't know if that's my experience only, but I don't know.
Well, could probably agree with that.
You what?
So I think people probably would agree with that.
Yeah, it's always a different smell. I don't know why. Maybe they all use same cleaning products or something. I don't know. But anyway, first day of 4th grade. We're gonna go ahead and just segue to that. I remember that day pretty clearly. I remember I got there a little later than some of the other kids. Our bus had a lot of people to pick up, and usually our bus would have to go to the high school and then go to the elementary. And so we got there a little later than some of the other kids, and when I get there, I had 2 different sets of friends come up to me and be like, hey, we're saving seats for you. So the desks were in clusters of 4, and I had 3 friends sitting there, and they had saved me a seat. And then I had a singular friend that had saved me a seat. And in my brain, I'm like, I know the right thing to do is to go sit with the friend that saved me the seat that's alone, right? Like, that's the right thing to do. And I've always felt bad about this, but I didn't sit with her. I sat with the group of 4. And I've just always felt really bad about that. And I've apologized to that person. But it's just, I don't know, one of those things where I knew the right thing to do and I didn't do the right thing. But I felt like I did a lot of that in 4th grade. I was a kid. Kids gonna make mistakes, and they're allowed to. And it's just something I've always felt really bad about, though. I've never been able to forget that. And then, I don't know, 4th grade was just generally a hot mess. I think this was actually the year I had strep throat. I can't remember. I know I mentioned that before. I got really sick, and my mom made me go to the meeting anyway. This might have been the year. This is the year, I remember now, that I did have strep throat. Do you remember if I mentioned this before Japan?
I do think you did. I don't remember
Okay.
exactly the year it happened, but I do remember you talking about it.
Okay. So I had strep throat, and I remember I was so sick. I missed quite a bit of school. And what I missed out on was learning the states of, the United States. And, like, all the other kids knew this song to remember the states, and I didn't know, and no one caught me up on it. Which kind of reminds me of whenever I was sick in, like, the 2nd grade or 1st grade or whatever. I'd missed out on learning the months, which I taught myself those, but I could never memorize the states. And then this was also the year that I had my first panic attack. Basically, I, like, woke up one day and I wasn't able to breathe. Like, I couldn't breathe and my heart was pounding, and I'm like, this is not right. So I'm freaking out. I run to my mom. She's like, start walking in circles, which I'm like, what? I can't breathe. So she has me, like, doing this half jog around the house in a circle, and she calls the hospital. And she's, like, on the phone with them, and they're like, yeah, you need to bring her to the emergency room. And I'm like, okay. And she's still making me run. And I'm like, can I stop running? And she's like, get in the car. I'm like, I get in the car. And so we get to the hospital, and they, like, make me take my shirt off, which made me really uncomfortable. It was men that was dealing with me, and I think I would have felt more comfortable with women. But, like, basically, they put all these, like, sticky things on my chest and on my heart to monitor. And it was, like, this whole thing. And they were doing all these tests on me. And the nurse was like, well, it was 2 men. One was the doctor, and one, I think, was, like, maybe this was, like, his residency or whatever, or he was becoming a nurse or something. This was, like, a student thing, I believe. And so the doctor leaves the room, and the other guy is like, I think you have a heart murmur. And I'm like, what's a heart murmur? And he's like, well, it's a hole in your heart. I'm like, what the hell? And I'm, like, freaking out. My mom's freaking out. And then the doctor comes back in and, kind of hears what this guy told us. And he gets kind of irritated with the other guy. And he's like, no, it's not a heart murmur. What it seems like is a panic attack. And he's like, are you anxious about anything? And the reason I had the panic attack was because I was scared to tell my teacher that I'm a Jehovah's Witness and I don't celebrate holidays. Which this was a common theme, I never was good with this. It was stressful because the thing is whenever I'd tell a teacher that I'm a Jehovah's Witness, there'd be a switch. All of a sudden, my needs didn't matter. I didn't matter. I was boiled down to being a Jehovah's Witness. And after that, they would be cold and harsh towards me, which I'm guessing my teacher must have known because my brother had also had this teacher. And he was obviously a Jehovah's Witness too, and had to have told them. Though, I don't know, maybe my brother didn't tell them. I really don't know. But,
it might have been easier for him not to.
Yeah, I really don't know. I know my brother had a very, very hard time in school. He was bullied a lot, and he didn't really have any friends. And he was just lonely, and he would just read all the time. I know he had friends when he was younger, but the older he got, that just went away. And, yeah, I kind of hate that for him. I feel like he really had a hard time. I do believe he's also neurodivergent. And I hate that for him. He had a really hard time growing up in that house, too. But, anyway, the doctor's schedule is to go meet up with a specialist in Little Rock, which was, like, 3 hours from where we lived. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and put our trigger warning here. I'm about to talk about sexual assault, and if that's something that you are sensitive to, or would be upsetting to you or distressing to you, I would say leave the room now, and I will put timestamps in the description to let you know when we're done talking about this. But anyway, let's jump in. So we go to Little Rock, and I've mentioned before my health anxiety. And it was, like, through the roof. And we're, like, in the city, and we get to this giant medical building. And I remember it had a helipad, and my parents were like, oh, look, it has helicopters. I'm like, oh, holy hell, I'm dead. I'm dying. Because I'm like, anytime there's usually helicopters and you're getting taken away in a helicopter, you're dying. Like, you're likely not living. This is like emergency. So I'm like, oh my god, am I that close to dying? Which I'm just like confused because I'm like, I don't feel like I'm dying. um, it was just I didn't realize that I was okay. It was just they also probably did emergency stuff like that. But it really freaked me out. So we get to this building, and they have us go to like this really high floor, and this floor was really weird. It didn't feel like the other floors of the hospital. It was very dark. Like, not many of the rooms were lit up. The hallway wasn't very lit up. The hallways were very narrow. And it had, like, office areas, too. It was really creepy looking. It felt like the back rooms. And we could not figure out where we had to go. There wasn't, like, a lot of signage. And we finally find a room that we think it's it. And we go and sit in it. And, like, there's nobody else up here. That's also what was weird. It was just a very weird, dark area. It felt like we were in an area we weren't supposed to be, but this is where we were told to go. And so there's this tiny little room off the beaten path that they put us in. And we're waiting, and, I'm sitting on the table. There wasn't, like, a lot of medical stuff like in a normal doctor room. It felt very office-y, except for one little medical table. And it was just really weird. So we all go into the room, and it's like all one room, but kind of separated. So my brother and dad sat in these two chairs by the door, and then further in is the table that I'm sat on, and my mom's by me. And the room was just, I don't know, it was just really weird. And, I could be misremembering this, but I don't remember the doctor really testing much on my body. The only thing I can really remember doing, so like the doctor came up and he blocked off the view of my brother and dad with his body, and my mom was at my head, and he just kind of looks at me, and I don't remember what he said, but he puts his hand in my pants. And he slid his hand down to my vagina, and he just, like, kind of, like, groped it for, like, a good amount of time. Like, minutes. Like, multiple minutes. And I'm like, huh? And I, like, look at my mom, and she's like, it's okay. And, like, I think she looked, like, concerned, but she told me it's okay. And he didn't explain why he did it. And I've done like a lot of research trying to look up why a doctor would grope my vagina for anxiety, and there's no reason. I just got molested by a doctor.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that's what had happened. I knew it was something that upset me, and a few years ago, I was talking to some friends about it, and they're like, bro, you were molested by a doctor. What? Yeah, that's what that is. And so that experience has been another reason why I'm not very good with doctors. I do remember it was a very out-of-body experience when it started to happen. It felt like I floated out of my body and was watching what happened from above. And I do remember that, and it was almost like I was seeing what was happening to me from the viewpoint of the doctor or something, like a bad dream. And I've never really understood why my mom let that happen. Literally, he came in and groped me, and then he said we were all done, and he left. And we all just got up and left the hospital, and then there was no more talk of what happened. I was just told it was a panic attack. I wasn't treated further for my anxiety. That was just it. I literally went to this creepy room, got molested by a doctor, and left. I don't know. Maybe there's more that I'm not remembering. I'm not really sure. Mm.
I hope not.
Just really upsetting. You know.
Yeah, I mean, it's valid.
We haven't gotten to that point, but there's more abuse that happened in my home that I haven't talked about yet, and it's just a common theme where my mom doesn't do anything. And it's really upsetting. And after the hospital, we went to TGI Fridays, which was my brother's favorite place to eat. Back in the day, before it was Fridays, it was very kid-friendly. And, yeah, I got no help with the anxiety. Just basically, this is something you have to live with. And that's it. And, yeah, anyway, let me, write down the timestamp for...
Do you need a second, or...?
This. I'm okay. I think I'm just gonna keep going, keep trucking. But, this is, that's all I will be talking about the sexual abuse, for this episode. You know, I just feel like this was the year, I really started changing as a person, like, just fundamentally changing. It felt like the darkness that I've talked about was just really getting me this year. Things were not great. The Kingdom Hall stuff was getting worse for my parents. I was struggling with juggling everything. I was really struggling with my schoolwork. Like, I could not grasp math. The math that I was learning in 4th grade, I just could not get it. No matter what I did or how much I tried or how much I studied, it did not work for me. And I think it was because I'm neurodivergent and I just couldn't get it. So I had this teacher that would keep me in from recess, which no kid is going to learn if they're being kept from recess, you know? And I get that the teacher, you know, she would yell at me and she's like, why can't you get it? And she would get really mad at me. And, you know, I couldn't understand it. And it was just like, she's like, you know, I'm taking my personal time to try to teach you this. And I'm like, I don't want your time. I don't get it. And I shut down. And Japan, you've actually seen me the way I shut down when it comes to math.
Oh, yeah.
I can't get it. I just can't get it. And like I said, I think it's because, you know, I'm neurodivergent and it's a disability. And like I've mentioned before, these teachers did not care that I had something happening because they're like, oh, you're just the weird kid because you're a Jehovah's Witness. No, there was more going on. You know, I was like really good at English, but math was like, this is when I shut down in school. This is when I stopped caring. This is when I stopped trying. And I loved school before that. I loved learning, but this was my turning point for shutting down. And it was just destroying my confidence too. And I remember this one day she kept me in from recess and she just got so frustrated with me. She's like, go outside, we're done for today. And so I'm like, in tears, and I run outside, and I'm running outside, and I don't think I was paying very good attention, and I ran really hard into a friend of mine, and we bumped our coconuts like really hard. Our coconuts, our heads. I don't know why I said coconuts.
I like it. It's cute.
Our little coconuts. We hit them really hard. I ended up getting knocked out from it. It was just not a good day. And when I came to, like, the whole playground was around me, all these kids. I was a little skinned up. And they didn't send me to the nurse. They didn't tell my parents. And, like, as an adult, I've heard that if you get knocked out, that can cause brain damage. Like, that's essentially something really bad happening. And I'm just like, somebody should have, I don't know, checked my head more. I don't know. I was being failed medically on so many levels. This year, I also got a boyfriend. There was this boy that I really liked, and we both liked each other a lot, and we ended up being boyfriend and girlfriend, which he was actually neurodivergent too. He had been diagnosed. He got diagnosed with what they used to call ADD, but now it's ADHD, and our teacher hated him, by the way. She could not stand him. She didn't make accommodations for him. She just hated him for something that he had no control over. I don't think he was medicated, and no one was helping him. He got in trouble all the time, which, big thing, having boyfriend, big no-no. I wasn't allowed to have a boyfriend. My dad made that very clear. And it also went against our religious beliefs to date someone outside the congregation. I mean, we're in freaking 4th grade. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what is the harm of a little boyfriend, But, it was exciting. And I liked the way it felt. It felt good that someone liked me and cared about me. And I kind of had to learn how to separate my feeling of not being good enough for God from these butterflies I was getting, and I just couldn't understand why God would want to kill me in Armageddon for something that made me feel so happy. And everything else was really crappy. The Kingdom Hall wasn't great. Schoolwork, teachers, not great. But my social life at home was good. I had friends. I had a little boyfriend, and that felt good. And I wasn't allowed to be close to my friends at the Kingdom Hall because of whatever drama. But it was a lot to juggle because panic attacks, they were just normal at this point. This was just something I dealt with. This was also the year that the movie Aragon came out. Did you ever read those books, Japan?
I did not. I didn't see the movie either.
Okay, well, it was huge in my school, and the movie came out this year, and so we went on this field trip to go see it. If my mom would have known more about what the movie was, I don't think she would have let me go on this field trip, but I don't think that she fully knew what it was about, so she let me go. I think there was, hesitation to let me go, but she ended up letting me go. And I was so excited, because me and my little boyfriend were it's oh, we're going on a little date. And so, we sat by each other at the movie, and he shared, his drink or popcorn or whatever with me. And, we were, when we were sitting there, he put his arm on the armrest and kind of kept draping his arm over the armrest, kind of towards me, and I'm I think he wants to hold my hand, but I was oh, but maybe he just needs extra room. And so it was just obviously not, why would he be sitting like that? But we were both too scared to hold hands, so on the bus I'm I think he was trying to hold my hand, and she ended up going and asking him, and he was trying to hold it, so we ended up sitting in the same seat and holding hands. And obviously it's exciting, and I had the butterflies, and, that was a good part of that year. And even at one point, he was we need to kiss. I want to kiss you. And we made this plan to go on the playground and kiss, and I ended up chickening out. I wish I could have enjoyed these moments more without the thought of, God is going to kill you for this. I hated that for myself. It was always like that. Anyway, this is not going to be a great segue. But next we're going to be talking about suicide. So this is...
Wow. That's a change.
Yeah, this is your trigger warning. Your trigger warning to head out if this is something that is upsetting to you. Totally valid. I'll put the timestamps in the description. I'm going to be lumping kind of 2 stories together under the same umbrella here, so we have less timestamps. So here we go. Okay, the summer before 4th grade, I didn't realize it, but I was experiencing suicidal ideation. The first time, I kind of really thought about this was I was on my back porch, and I just kind of I had seen the clothesline, and, my thought was how easy it would be just to hang myself. Okay, that's so dark.
It is, but I mean, it's understandable for the situation
life.
You were in. Yeah.
It's part of my life. And
you didn't do it, and you're here.
Yeah, and, I would also suffer from these thoughts of hurting myself. And I think that some of these went along with OCD. With OCD, sometimes you have these kind of thoughts that are just wild, and kind of hard to get past. But yeah, that was something I was struggling with. We had been taught by Jehovah's Witnesses, so one thing they talk about is, whenever you die, it's going to be no time passes, you're just going to wake up and be in paradise. Because basically what Jehovah's Witnesses believe is when you die, it's you're asleep, you know nothing, you don't go to heaven, you don't go to hell. But there is a paradise earth that's going to happen after Armageddon. So when our Armageddon happens and paradise is here, the dead ones will rise. And it's just going to be like they died and just woke up and they're alive. Which always was a weird thought to me, because I'm like, does that mean that they're going to like come out of the ground like zombies? Like, this is one thing, like they made it like it's like this happy little thing, but I've always just been like very confused by that. They're just going to wake up and be, you know, crawling out of the ground. And I used to think about that, of how I'd have to crawl my way out, but it was easier to want to take myself out, because I'm like, well, damn, you know, I'm not gonna have to suffer. I just die and then I wake up and I don't have to worry about health stuff or any of these other things. So this was like a really big thing in my head of like, this seems like the way to go, because then I don't have to deal with all this other stuff and I don't have to constantly spend all this time trying to prove to God that I'm a good person or whatever. I don't know. It's funny because it was like such a contrast to how I had been thinking about trying to postpone Armageddon. But it was just, it seemed easier and I was tired. I was very young to be this tired, but I was very tired already. This whole year was also the year that a friend at school was having issues with suicide and not doing great. Her father had killed himself when she was just like a baby, like barely very old. So it was just sort of a thing she grew up with. It was something that had always loomed over her, and people in town would talk about it and say really scummy things about it. So, you know, it's one of those things that you grow up with and it sticks with you. And one day we were in the gym together and we were sitting next to each other and she's talking to me. She's like, you know, I'm thinking about how I should just be like my dad, or like be how, like, I think people were saying stuff like she's gonna be like her dad someday and do it too, and it was not nice things, you know, very hard things to grow up with, and she said she wanted to do it too. And there's a little more to this story. I don't really want to talk about it. She also kind of wanted to hang herself and had shown me some things that she wanted to do to herself, and I don't want to talk about that. I just don't. It was just really hard to have a friend, though, feeling that way too. But I wasn't normally the kid to talk to my parents about this kind of thing, but it felt bigger than that, you know, and the issues I have with my parents. So I got home and I sat with it for a couple hours. And we ended up having dinner, and it really felt like the darkness was, you know, moving in on me, and I really didn't know what to do. But we were in the living room, and my mom could kind of tell something was wrong, and I was like, I told her what was happening, and I had thought I was going to get in trouble or something, or get my friend in trouble, but my mom, like, freaked out, and, you know, we were in a small town, so everybody knows everybody, so my mom ends up calling her mom. And they were on the phone for like a really long time. And I'm like over here sweating bullets. Like, I'm in trouble. She's in trouble. We're both in trouble. Actually, it wasn't too bad. They got off the phone. My mom told me I did the right thing. I was really scared to see my friend the next day. I thought she was gonna be mad at me, but she ended up hugging me. And she was like, you know, thank you for, you know, telling someone. Because it sounded like her mom and her had had a good talk about it and what happened with her dad. So, thankfully it worked out for the best. Anyway, that's all I'll be talking about suicide in this episode. So, yeah, we're gonna move on from that. I'll put the timestamps in the description. Anyway, so that same year, this friend that I was just talking about, she had some other issues with her mom, and she was like, hey, I want to run away. And I was like, dude, I want to run away. Like, I had been having these feelings of wanting to run away too. I didn't really realize why I wanted to run away, but looking back, you know, as an adult, I know that I was being abused, and I didn't realize that I was being abused. And that's, you know, why I wanted to run away. Which I was very protective of this friend, and I had said to them, let me save up some money, which basically was just 1 month of working, helping my mom clean the banks. $20. I don't know. I thought what I thought we were gonna do with $20. So I started taking, camping
Sounds like a
gear.
lot when you're a kid, though.
Yeah, as a kid, in fourth grade, that's a lot of money in my opinion. As an adult, I'm like, $20 is like $5 now. It feels like. And so I was like, let me save that money. Let me get my paycheck, and I started taking camping gear from my parents. And I started packing it into a bag, and I also had been hiding canned goods kind of in the back of the pantry where my parents wouldn't find it, so that I could put it in the bag too, so we had food. I had enough wherefore to know that there were things I needed to save, but not enough to it was illogical. So we had made the plan at the edge of the playground. It was the edge of the playground had this small fence that led to a huge field behind it, which, looking back, I'm like, oh my god, how did they not lose a bunch of kids? I don't know. But we were gonna run away at recess, and I got prepared, and when I felt prepared, I went to school, and I was like, hey, I'm good to go the next day. I'd say this was maybe a week or two later. And she was like, oh, I kind of forgot we were gonna do that. And then she's like laughing about it. She's like, I wasn't serious. I'm not really mad at my mom anymore. And I was like crushed. I had wanted out. This was my way to get out and not be alone. And I was like, oh yeah, we were just kidding. Never mind the fact that I had a bag at home ready to go. I'd planned out.
I hate that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm glad that I didn't run away. Like, I know that I was in a bad situation, but...
You need to eventually get somebody to get you out of there.
Spoilers, God.
I didn't say who, it's not me.
Was it not?
We're just roommates, I don't know what you're talking
okay,
about.
are we now? So, I was getting abused, and this is, I didn't understand that at the time, and why I wanted to run away so bad. And then also that year, I ended up getting this teacher, like I said, didn't really like me. She really liked my brother, and I was like, oh, hopefully she'll like me. She seems like a really great teacher, but I don't know. She really wasn't towards me. I also had gotten in trouble this year for wearing makeup, which I had this like little makeup bag, this little clutch purse full of it, and my mom had let me have it, and she knew I played with it, and I had packed it in my backpack, and she saw it, and she was like, are you taking that to school? And I was like, yeah. She's like, okay. She wasn't upset or anything. And I get on the bus, my friend and I do all this makeup. I know we had to have looked awful because one of the girls came up to us and she's like, I've always heard that your makeup isn't supposed to be noticeable. We were probably caked up with lipstick and foundation, and I know it had to be a mess, but we thought we looked hot. We were like, dang, we are so fine. Like, we got like all this lipstick and foundation and eyeshadow. And so we get to school. She's in a grade below me. She was my next door neighbor that was like one of my best friends. And so she goes to her class and I go to mine. And all the kids are in the, hallways looking at me. And I'm like, damn, they must think I'm so cute. I don't think so. They probably thought I looked crazy. But I get to class and my teacher beelines it. She's like straight to me and embarrasses me in front of the whole class, and she's like grilling me on why I've got this makeup, where did it come from. She was like really mad at me, and she's like, where is your makeup? And like, so she confiscates it, and she's like, you go to the bathroom right now and wash that crap off. I was so embarrassed, and I go to the bathroom and I barely make it, and I'm crying, and I end up washing it all off, and I give myself some time to cry it out. And then I get back to the classroom, and she went to the principal's office and called my mom. And I'm like, oh my god, I'm like in a lot of trouble. And she ended up giving me, either she gave me my makeup back or my mom had to go pick it up. I don't remember. I wasn't in trouble with my mom, but I was told not to bring it to school anymore. And I'm like, I'm never going to school again. This is so embarrassing. I
would have lit that teacher up if that was my kid.
It's just,
you have no right to say that.
Like,
there's nothing wrong with that.
Like, here's my thing. I could understand if she's concerned and she thinks that I had found makeup that I wasn't supposed to have, and if she would have been like, hey, how hard would have it been to pull me aside and be like, hey, I know you're wearing some makeup today, where'd you get that, or is your mom okay with you wearing that? Like, there's a lot of ways that she could have handled that instead of embarrassing me in front of all my friends and in front of everybody in the class. I was so embarrassed. I even remember the clutch it was in. The whole thing, that's just like super stands out. I was embarrassed. You know, I felt like I was never going to recover. I'm like, I'm never going to school again. You can't make me. I'm not going back, you know? But I did. I had to. And I was rough. I don't think my teacher handled that well, but she didn't like me, so I don't think she cared to handle it well. I had a lot of trouble with that teacher. Never got like really in trouble as much as she just always had a problem with me and would always be very snarky or mean or very short with me. Yeah, I try to give teachers a lot of the benefit of the doubt, but my brother didn't have that same experience with her. He really liked her, and I don't know if it was because he was such a quiet little bookworm, you know, and she was kind of that way. I don't know. It was tough. It was a tough year. You know, we were still going strong with being Jehovah's Witnesses. We did have a lot of issues. My mom was having a lot of issues at the Kingdom Hall with the people. The family that ran that Kingdom Hall owned the storage units right beside that Kingdom Hall. And I remember my mom had a locker there, and at one point, this one Jehovah's Witness, it was actually the woman that studied with us, she put super glue in my mom's lock, which she had just gotten like mad about something, and so like that was her way to get back at my mom. And so she like filled it with super glue. It's crazy. Like, what the hell, you know? And then she denied it. I'm not really sure what all happened there. You know, the family is very volatile, but my mom also just really can't get along with anybody. And it was a lot. It was a lot. It was very tiring because my mom has always been very big on telling me all of her problems, and I'm her emotional support child, and everything. It was a lot. It does get worse though, so that's something to look forward to.
On the next episode of Scarbazy.
Yeah, I think this is a good place to leave the episode. You know,
I didn't mean to make it ended on that.
No, I was ending it there, so it was just funny. I think this is a good place to leave the episode. You know, I feel like we covered a lot. That's most of 4th grade for me. You know, the best way I can describe this time in my life is that it was just a lot. It felt very dark and scary and confusing. I had a lot of feelings that I didn't understand. I was scared. My anxiety obviously was bad, and no one was doing it. You know, it's like I said earlier, I was in a room full of adults that did nothing to help, and I had adults around me that didn't protect me. And that is a common theme for my childhood, is a room full of adults that don't want good things for me. And
yeah,
you know, if I could, I'd snatch up little me and take care of them.
I know you would.
But anyway, that is episode 5. I hope that you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope that the things I talk about are helpful to other people, or at least give you someone to relate to with whatever experiences you have had growing up. And I just hope that you take care. You know, I never want these episodes. I know that I'm talking about some heavy subjects. Like I said, I feel like they're very important to talk about. I think the more that we talk about our experiences in life, the easier for us it becomes, but it also is easier for other people to feel like they can talk about their experiences. I think we have to be brave enough for one another to talk about these things. And, you know, if anybody wants to share their experiences in the comments, you are more than welcome to. And I genuinely hope with all of my heart that whoever is listening to this is doing well, and hope that you're taking care and taking care of yourself. And if you have gone through something similar to this, I hope that you are in the process of healing and finding peace. But anyway, thank you guys for listening. If you'd like to check out Japan's channel, he is Lost in Japan on YouTube. I will definitely link him down below. He usually does gaming content, so this is a little different, but if you want to support him, I will leave the links down below. Anyway, I hope that you guys take care, and I'll catch you next time. Bye!
Bye!